It is good to have sports back, folks. The NFL not quite there yet, but everything else, the NHL playoffs are in full swing at this point. Major League Baseball going at it in their 60-game season. At least some teams are hoping to have a 60-game season, and the NBA is back as well. Nice to have that distraction, right? I remember a long time ago when I was a full-time sports broadcaster, I told George Fogel, my good friend down in Cincinnati, the sports director at WLWT, I said, it doesn't really feel like I do anything that important on a day-to-day basis. And he told me that through the years, people that had what we think of as important jobs, people who work, in courthouses and in medical things, what do you call that? Medical? The medical field, I guess, would be the proper way to say that. They said sports and people who report on sports are a good distraction for everyone else who has those stressful jobs. And I've never fully grasped that until now, until going months without any sort of sports and just having to listen to people complain about this, that, and the other thing, and the world is coming to an end. And maybe it is, but at night to have playoff hockey and to be watching the Reds as disappointing and frustrating as they had been up until this past Sunday, it's been a nice distraction. It's been the distraction we need, and the NFL is set to kick off now in less than 6 weeks. We are, as of recording this on August 3rd, 2020, we are 38 days away from the NFL season supposedly kicking off. I think it's going to happen. I think baseball over the next 2 weeks will tell us whether or not there need to be some adjustments with all the travel and allegedly the St. Louis Cardinals, those dirty birds going out to the casinos. We can't do things like that. But I think we can have an NFL season. The Las Vegas Raiders just announced that they will have 0 fans in the stadium all season long. That's going to be how it is. That isn't great, obviously, but at the same time, for someone like myself, really for most of us, I think most true football fans don't really care whether or not they can go to the games. They want to be able to watch the games. I've talked about it at length before. Going to NFL games right now, unless you're looking for an excuse to get away from your family and drink all day long, going to NFL games, really not that fun. Once you've been to a stadium, you've been to a stadium. After that, it's kind of like, I don't want to sit next to strangers and pay $8 for a beer and not be able to keep up with the rest of the games going on around the league. So I think before long, most teams will fall in line behind the Raiders and say, we're not going to have any fans in our stadium this year. And for the Raiders, that's a brand new stadium. That's a brand new stadium out in Sin City, and no one's going to be sitting in it. A lot of players opting out. So there's this deadline that they keep talking about, that it might be Tuesday, it might be Wednesday, where NFL players have the option to opt out of the 2020 season. I don't get where the NFL thinks there can be a deadline. Unless I'm really missing something here, the only benefit to this deadline is guaranteeing yourself some money. So if a guy with a non-pre-existing condition wants to opt out, he can still get $150,000 for the season. And if you are someone who has a pre-existing condition, I believe you get $350K. Look, that's changed to most of these guys, especially the superstars, the ones who drive the ratings, the Tom Brady's, Drew Breeses. Patrick Mahomes now makes that, I think, every time he snaps the football. So I don't really get the opt-out deadline. We saw the pitcher from the Red Sox earlier this week. It turns out he's now having some sort of issues with his heart due to having COVID-19. So when players see that, what if an NFL player develops symptoms for weeks and weeks? And we've heard there's an NBA player out there who still can't get his conditioning back after testing positive. I think that things like that are what are going to drive some of these guys who've already got 20, 30, 40, 50 million in the bank to say, maybe it's not worth it for me. Maybe if you're... Now, some of the older guys, Drew Brees, Tom Brady, they're going to be, I think, like LeBron. Let's get this thing on. I've got a limited number of years left. But then you look at guys maybe like a Lamar Jackson, who I think has said he'll play, but the younger guys who have time, and maybe some of the guys who have money like Russell Wilson. I'm not coming up with any good examples right now, but you guys know what I mean. Those guys might say, I'm only 27. I've got a $70 million contract. Someone like Joey Bosa, who just signed a big deal. And I'm not suggesting these are the people who would do it, but just as an example, they might be the ones that say, hey, I don't want to risk my health for one season of football, one that we're not even sure will go and complete its season. So, and the players are going to be fine, right? We know that. They just don't want to spread it. A lot of these guys close with their relatives, with their parents, with their in-laws. Some of them, we've seen the Mike Trout situation in baseball. He's got a pregnant wife. He's going away, and he's going to be placed on that paternity list, and he doesn't want to take the risk of making his wife sick. There are so many unknowns. So I guess we can just continue to wait and see. But at any rate, the NFL, the Hall of Fame game was supposed to be Thursday, August 5th. No, I guess that'd be Wednesday. So the preseason is out. I won't miss the preseason, but that little bump of, hey, the Hall of Fame game's back. It would have been Cowboys-Steelers this year. It would have felt good, but it's not going to happen. So the players are going to be fine. We'll see what happens. Baseball not setting a great example when it comes to travel. Whether or not you can do the NFL in a bubble seems very unlikely given the severity of the games, but they're going to try it out. We'll see if it works, and time will tell. If nothing else, it feels like they're going to at least be able to try it, which I think 2, 3, 4 months ago, it was a real possibility they were just going to nix it completely. So it feels like they'll be able to try it, and like with baseball, when someone tests positive, you've got games the next day and the next day and the next day. In football, if someone tests positive, hopefully it happens on hopefully it happens on a Tuesday, I suppose. You can get them out of there, but only time will tell. I mean, again, I'm an idiot, and I'm trying to sit here and think of scenarios that I can make sense of. The doctors at the top levels who are doing their best, and I trust them more than I trust anyone else, but even they have struggled to kind of predict what happens. So we'll figure it out. In Cincinnati, one Joseph Mixon tweeted over the weekend that he has some big decisions to make. And this is one of those things. Joseph Tyler Mixon, by the way, just looked up the middle name. Joseph Tyler. That's a nice name. Could have went by JT. JT Mixon. JTM. He should sign a deal with JTM Meats down in Cincinnati. Joe Mixon tweeted he's got some big decisions to make. Presumably this is contract related. It's been floated out there. He wants a deal before the season starts. We've seen in recent years Ezekiel Elliott do this. He's already indicated he's good with playing during the pandemic, by the way. Mixon, Joe Mixon, Joseph Tyler Mixon, whatever you want to call him. Again, this has torn me apart, I think, like any other contract in Bengals history. You can't really pay him the big money. Again, I go back to the example, how many Super Bowl teams have had a star running back over the last, 10, 15 years? You look at what happened last year with the 49ers, they're getting rid of all of they're just cutting loose these guys. They are cutting loose the running backs. The Chiefs, who won the Super Bowl last year, Damian Williams, was probably 1 yard short of maybe taking home Super Bowl MVP. He said, I'm not playing this year. No one batted an eye. I mean, the Patriots have won how many Super Bowls and how many running backs can you name? The Eagles did it a few years ago. I think LeGarrette Blount, journeyman, a good journeyman, but a journeyman, was the one who was handling the load there in Philadelphia. When Denver won it, they had Peyton Manning at quarterback. They had an excellent defense at the time, but they did it with C.J. Anderson, who then comes in and just plugs right in and takes over for Todd Gurley a few years later. I just don't know how many more examples we need to see that the running back position, and I love Joe Mixon. He's been an excellent player. The Bengals took a lot of heat for drafting him. He has been a grade A model citizen since he was drafted. He had that awful incident the day after his 18th birthday where he punched a woman in the face, and it was caught on camera, and it was brutal, and it was heinous. And at the time, I didn't want the Bengals to have anything to do with him. But when you're 18 and you have the worst day of your life and it's caught on camera, there are two routes you can take, and he took the best route possible. Now, he's going to get paid big money. I just don't know that Cincinnati should be the ones to do it. I hope he gets paid, but you can't pay him like you paid Zeke. Look at Todd Gurley. 2 years ago, big contract. Now he's gone. David Johnson, same situation. Paid him a nice chunk of money. Now he's off the roster. Couldn't stay healthy. And again, the teams that go deep into the playoffs rarely, if ever, have a star, big money running back. I just don't believe in it. I'm sorry. Mixon. And the ugly thing is, too, if the Bengals don't pay him, they're going to get that cheap label thrown at them. Whatever. Who cares? Go out there and try to win games. The Bengals finally did get Joe Burrow under contract. Really, there was no no one was worried about that happening, but it did happen, and it feels good to have it signed and delivered. Burrow saying all the right things, of course, as you would expect him to do. He came out and said he's not going to touch any of the guaranteed money. I think $23 million. Maybe that was a signing bonus. At any rate, it was a lot of millions, and he said, I'm not touching it. I'm going to live off my endorsements, let that money grow in the bank. My kind of guy. That's a southeastern Ohio guy right there. So Joe Burrow locked up. AJ Green, let's hope he makes it through camp healthy. And let's see what the Bengals can do this year. Excited to make it happen as everyone crowns Lamar Jackson and Baker Mayfield. I tell you what, Lamar Jackson got that number one. Let's talk about that. Lamar Jackson got number one on the top 100 players in the NFL right now. Of course, that's voted on by his peers. So it's hard to argue with other NFL players. But I think it's also reasonable to say NFL players aren't taking this that seriously. I mean, these are guys with lives and things to do, and they're 20-something-year-old millionaires. They're not going to sit there for 4 hours and put together a ballot. They're going to say, hey, he made a lot of highlights last year. He won MVP. I'm not saying all of them, but I think this idea that we should just say, well, whatever the players say goes, I just don't see it. And, of course, the big point of discussion came when Patrick Mahomes, A, wasn't the number one player, and B, wasn't even the number one quarterback. Russell Wilson and Lamar Jackson in front of one Patrick Mahomes on the NFL's top 100 players of the year, as voted on by NFL players. When it comes to quarterbacks, we all know they're more valuable than anyone else, right? As good as Aaron Donald may be, he's worth what? Maybe a win or two a year. Maybe he forces a fumble or puts together a couple sacks in a game, as to where someone like Mahomes, you take Mahomes off the Chiefs and they go from 13-3 to 7-9. Same thing for Russell Wilson. Same thing for Deshaun Watson. So I tried to think about this. Top 5 quarterbacks if you had to pick your guys for the next 2 years. And I think that's a fair thing to do. And I wasn't going to talk about it until I realized I don't think Lamar would even be in my top 5. And I've admitted I've been wrong on Lamar Jackson in the past. I did not think, but hey, every NFL team was too. He went 32nd overall. If everyone knew he'd look like this, I don't think he would have slid down to the absolute last pick in the first round of the draft pick a few years back. But if I'm looking at my top 5 quarterbacks, if I could pick, and these are the guys I'd want at the position over the next 2, maybe 3 years. Number 1, Joe Burrow. Kidding. Number 1, Patrick Mahomes. That's the obvious choice. That's what I didn't get about it. I think if any of those guys would have said, hey, if you can have any quarterback, are they really taking Lamar over Mahomes right now? I can't wrap my head around that. He was a coin toss away from going to back-to-back Super Bowls in his first 2 seasons as a starter. Now, number 2, I do agree with. Russell Wilson, I'll put him at 3, or at 2. Unless we're throwing Joe Burrow back in there. So Mahomes 1, Russell Wilson 2. I think Russell Wilson does more with less than anyone realizes. Doug Baldwin's been his best receiver. Other than that, not a lot of guys you can name. Not a lot of guys you can name. After that, give me Drew Brees. And here's where things get tricky. Because at the 4-5 spot, I've got Tom Brady 4. If you wanted to slide Lamar Jackson in there at 4, I'd be fine with that. But I'm taking Brady right there. Again, this is for the next 2 years. And then at 5, the guy I can't stand, but everyone's forgot about, is Ben Roethlisberger. Ben Roethlisberger was hurt last year. But the year before that, 34 touchdowns, 5,100 yards, 96 passer rating. We act like he just fell off a cliff. He looks like he's been living under a cliff for the past couple years, but people act like he's all of a sudden, because he missed 1 year, no good. I mean, the last 3 years, and again, I don't like Ben Roethlisberger at all, but the last 3 years, he's got, 93 touchdowns and he's got about 45 interceptions, 43 interceptions. I mean, passer rating, 2016, 95.4, 2017, 93.4, 2018, 96.5, and then last year he gets hurt in the first week of the season. Did people forget? And I know he doesn't have Antonio Brown anymore, but he's made every receiving core he's ever had a bunch of stars. So if I'm getting 2 more years, give me Big Ben. I don't even like Lamar as the best quarterback in the AFC North right now. Big Ben just turned 38 years old, and quarterback years anymore, not that old. not that old in quarterback years. Then at 6, I would put Lamar Jackson. Aaron Rodgers right after him, Deshaun Watson right after him. Aaron Rodgers, probably the most talented after Mahomes in the group. I just don't think he cares anymore. And I think this year we're going to see that a little bit more than we typically would because he's butthurt that they drafted Jordan Love in the first round. And I think he's kind of came out and said, yeah, this will probably be my last year here. So Aaron Rodgers, talented, number 2, but doesn't really care. And that's fine. He's got his money. He won a Super Bowl. If he goes on the market, he'll get another huge contract. Let's see how old Aaron Rodgers is. He's got to be up there as well. He's 36. He'll be 37 during the season. Older than I thought. Didn't realize he was that close to Big Ben. So I'm going Mahomes 1, Russell Wilson 2, Drew Brees 3, who, by the way, I know he's only got the 1 Super Bowl, but my goodness, you have to think about how bad the Saints were forever before he got there. And his defense, he's had historically bad defenses for the prime of his career. And he's still out there slinging it. And he's had about as bad a luck as you can have in the playoffs, too. We forget about that. Then give me Brady at 4. I'll be so curious to see what he does outside of New England. And then again, Big Ben at 5. And I don't like Big Ben one bit. But he has been underappreciated. When he first came into the league, overrated. Threw the ball 17 times a game, handed it off 98 times a game. But now he's become underrated. That's how that works. And then give me Lamar at 6. Rodgers, Deshaun, rounding it out. Probably put Andy Dalton after that, right? Did you see him in the Cowboys jersey? He looks crisp. Dak better be looking over his shoulder. He better be looking over his shoulder. So we'll see what happens now with all the NFL teams as the Raiders announce they are not going to have any fans whatsoever in the stands this fall. A lot of teams have already said, I shouldn't say a lot, a handful of teams have already said they're only going to be at 20% capacity. So there's that. I just don't see any way that we have fans. I think maybe this week is a week where everyone starts saying, all right, we can't have fans this year. So that's the way it's going to be. Hopefully the game still gets to be on TV where it's much better to enjoy than it possibly is in the stands. You've been to an NFL stadium. I went to MetLife last year to watch the Browns-Jets on Monday night. First time at the stadium. Really enjoyed it. Beautiful stadium. But after that, I'm good. I'd rather lay on my couch. Now, Monday night and Thursday night games, I get a little more. But outside of that, I want to be able to flip around, track my fantasy team, look at Twitter, not have some bunch of drunk 20-somethings behind me. I sound like an old man, don't I? I am an old man. When it comes to football, I am an old man. All right, that's it. This is a good old football podcast. I will be back next week for the rest of the season, assuming there is a season. Weekly podcast. I'm going to try to amp this up, get some guests. I got to do a better job promoting this thing. So if you want to help me, feel free. If you don't, it's my gig. I should figure it out myself. All right, I'm Matt Edwards. If you want to follow me on Twitter, it's at Matt Edwards. I don't really use Instagram that much anymore. Maybe I should start that back up as well. The kids are into that. All right, hope you've enjoyed. Tell a friend. Enjoy Auto Magic as they play us out. You've been listening to the Good Old Football Podcast.